Welcome, Corinna. I'm so glad you can join us, albeit virtually, for this event. And thank you for taking the chance to talk to us today a little bit about this documentary, which we're so delighted to have featured in the exhibition and on our website for the duration, for what was expected to be the duration of the exhibition prior to our unexpected closure due to coronavirus. So just to kind of kick the conversation off, it would be wonderful to know if you could tell us a little bit about how you began working with Gerhard Richter, from your earlier documentary on his work on the Cologne Cathedral window, and eventually to this film.
Mm-hmm. Well, it all starts with the 30-minute film I did with Gerhard Richter for the big window, 26 square meters for the Cologne Cathedral. That was a very big project in 2005. And during this project, we get to know each other, and I think there was established a certain feeling of trust. And so when the film was finished, we said, I said, why can't we go on for a larger project? And he said, well, yes, why not?
So there were these questions that arose were the questions that arose from the earlier project that you wanted to continue investigating, or was it when you were observing him in the studio that you realized that this was something that needed a longer study?
I wasn't that much in the studio in 2007, but I knew, of course, knew his work for decades, and I knew that there hasn't been a film project for more than 20 years. So this idea for me was an exciting challenge to maybe have a different kind of approach and really to film him while he was working in the studio. So, and this actually nobody ever did before over a long time, means weeks and months. And so I proposed this to him, and he get used to this idea. And so from time to time I called, and I remember one call, he said, "Oh, Miss Belz, you are calling because you want to know when I'm starting to paint this big series. I don't know it either." So actually it took a year until we start.
Wow.
But then, yes, it was really a sort of commitment, and really to that I had the feeling I can rely on that it will go on, and so that it will really be the way I thought it might be necessary, not only to do the film, but also to have a document, a kind of archive. So beyond the film, for maybe future generations or art historians in general. So this is even more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the remarkable things about your film is how it gives this rare glimpse into what that process is, because it's one thing, to study it, like you said, in books, and to have the process described in words, but to actually see the kind of labor and materiality that goes into that making, and it's not just by himself, it's his assistants as well, like preparing the paint, and the physicality of it as well. So you said you'd kind of like studied it before going into the studio. So what was actually the process of filming him? Was there anything surprising or unexpected that came in your observation as opposed to your study?
Okay, it was surprising all the time. So because you can't envision a process like this. So there were many basic information. So, for example, that he mixes the color on the canvas, and that with each layer you have a different kind of surface and painting, actually. So, and because he works with this very big squeegees, the squeegee has the size of the canvas, and so each time Richter touches the canvas, he is risking the whole painting, because there is the whole painting involved. And therefore, for me, watching this process was so tenseful, because the paintings sometimes change as quickly as the weather in the mountains. So, or like a curtain going up and down or something like this. So open and close. This was a very exciting experience, and also the way he approaches the paintings. So what means working on several paintings at the same time.
One of my favorite moments in the film is this moment where I think it's somewhere in the middle of the film, where he applies the blue paint onto the squeegee and is about to take it, like he's going to risk the entire canvas. And then he kind of stops and decides that that's not the right direction to go.
Yeah, he says, all of a sudden, he says, I don't know how to go on. I wasn't prepared for this, of course. And then he said, the blue color doesn't work, so I will destroy the whole painting with this color. And then he said, I feel as uncomfortable as like being in a hospital. And so this was, I felt like he attacks me.
Exactly. That was my sense too, that he was lashing out because there was this kind of moment where he was being observed, and he was very uncomfortable with being observed as he painted, and he was kind of taking it out on you as the filmmaker at that moment. It was quite surprising. Yeah.
Yes, but I was shocked for the first moment, but then I spontaneously react, and for me it's always better to name the problem than to deny the problem. Therefore I ask him, yes, what happened. And so I think afterwards this confrontation in the end makes it easier to go on. So then you create some distance, you go home, you contemplate and find a solution how you can come back and go on with the filming. And in the next scene, I ask him what's the problem with the camera, and then he answers the question. So he says, painting is a secretive business.
One of the things that struck me in watching the documentary was that repeatedly he talks about the painting didn't go according to plan, and it almost had a life of its own and all of that. And yet at the same time, when he's talking to Benjamin, he's talking about like there is no plan. So was there something that you noticed about this kind of like moving back between saying that I don't have a plan and then having a plan and the painting doesn't go according to it?
Yes, for example, the paintings he's working on in the last sequence of the film, there were 4 paintings in the studio, and he was planning, and he says this in the film, I want to do 4 green monochrome paintings. And then he starts with these paintings with the first layers, and then after a while, and this was several weeks, I think, he turned them into white monochrome paintings. And this was, I think this is this kind of decision-making which happens in the head, and you can't see it in the film, but in a way you can see it because you see that this approach to the canvas is as well a physical approach. It's really physical work, hard work. And at the same time, I think maybe it's like sometimes like thunder and lightning, all these images he has seen in his time, in his lifetime, and the works he did before are compared to the situation he is on the canvas. So I think that's really a very decisive and complex process. And it's hard to talk about because everybody who knows him very well, like for example his wife, his assistant, they know that there too much talking is a sort of destruction for the dialogue between the painter and the painting.
And I actually really appreciated that, you know, the long periods of silences and just observing him in the film, where, say, for instance, you're just walking, you know, going down, I think, in his neighborhood to find that fence that he paints.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, he's got the memory of the photograph that he took, which
Mm-hmm.
became the basis of the painting, but in that moment it's something completely different.
Yeah, completely different. Yes, I was so surprised to see this very ordinary and banal fence in the neighborhood, and when you see this little enigmatic painting, there you really know what art is all about. So that's the transformation from the everyday photo and then to the canvas. And even this doesn't happen to him very often. So he takes thousands of photos, but there are only one or two or three or several in a row that invite him to create a painting.
So that brings me to this moment in the film when you're in his study office area, where he's got a few images on the wall, including the Courbet, the Picasso print, and then, of course, the photograph from Birkenau, which he discusses, and which would become the basis of the series that is in the exhibition, Gerhard Richter Painting, after all. Do you recall, you know, you've included some of your discussion about it, but was there any sense at that moment that this photograph or work might be destined for a painting?
No, I had no idea. It just was in the studio, and we first filmed the scene with the photos of his family.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went together in his studio, and I started just improvising. So it's, for me, filming, it's often like free jazz. So just go on in a certain mood if it's everybody feels at ease. So, and then I ask him the little reproductions and postcards which were on the wall, and then we ended up at the photos of Birkenau. What means they were there over years. Yes, so that means all this is in development and in his mind for a very long time. And I think this is also the reason because these paintings are so meaningful, because it's not just painting these photos and then decide to turn it into an abstract painting, but it has been in his mind for such a long time that it has this knowledge and experience and wisdom and also emotion. So there is really an emotional ongoing process, I think, for him.
Yeah, no, it was, you know, when you see the process pictures as they develop, it's kind of, he starts off with these black, you know, kind of almost black and white paintings, and then they eventually end up as abstracts.
No, what I mean regarding the Birkenau paintings and all the other abstract paintings is that these paintings have an inside. So they have so many layers, and they are almost built up like a sculpture. So somebody told me that the very early layers in these abstract paintings, after 5-6 years, are not dry because they are still have humid
moisture.
Yes, and that's so interesting. This inside of a painting. That's also a thing which came to my mind when I filmed in the studio.
What was also, you know, really striking in seeing the kind of physical dragging of these squeegees across the canvas was also, they weren't always canvases too. There were sometimes, I think the series that you start with are actually aluminum on wood panels, and
Mm-hmm.
and there's a kind of, you know, you can hear that in the way the squeegee is, or the knife is going across the canvas. What struck me in your film was, even though painting is this visual medium, you've been so attentive to the sound of the studio as well. Could you talk a little bit about your choice to really, in some ways, foreground that aspect of the sound, including the kind of squelching of the paint and the sound of the dragging of the squeegee?
Mm-hmm. So because yes, sound is very interesting for me, because when the films were shown in the cinema, so you have this really powerful sound system, and as a documentary filmmaker, I also think that the authentic sound reveals a big variety of emotions too. So when the squeegee is put on the canvas, sometimes there is a more aggressive and powerful way to almost attack the canvas with a squeegee, and sometimes Richter does it in a very gentle and slow way. So I think the sound is, in this case, is more powerful than, for example, to involve music, because music for me is also fictionalizes the scene and makes it more like a fiction film. And but this all this sound you hear in the film is primarily the effect of a very careful sound design. There was one little story. We went back to the studio to record some extra sound with a squeegee, and Gerhard Richter came to help us with the squeegee. And then I said, okay, well, but now it sounds so dry because it was the squeegee just on the white canvas. And I asked him if we can add some paint. And then he said, no way. So when I add paint, I have to finish the painting. And I can't do that just for sound recording. So that was clear for him. Painting is not only a secretive business, like he puts it in the film, but also a serious, very serious business. So
it's a commitment.
Yeah, it's a real commitment, and you can't waste paint just for a sound recording. That's a sin.
He's very particular about the setup, clearly, in the studio, and that actually takes me back to the start of your film, and you open with him with the scene of him setting up his own tripod and camera. Could you talk a little bit about what that opening meant and why you chose to start the film like that?
So the camera was ours and the tripod was his. And maybe this scene shows that that he was aware to take an active part in the film. So it's this kind of commitment which I felt after a while. And it's not only me, the filmmaker, observing the protagonist, but it's much more. And you I think, but that's in every film I'm working on. It's a collaboration, and you are sharing the responsibility what the film when it's finished.
So what was interesting to me as well about the film was that you're not just showing Richter in his studio, but you also go outside it and you have his exhibitions, and 2 or 3 exhibitions you've included and footage from them. Why was it important for you to kind of feature that aspect of in a film about Richter's painting?
Yeah, I think exhibitions important to him. So, and he likes very much to work on an exhibition. And I think in the end of the film, he says it's like an opera, And in the moment the works are exhibited somewhere else, it's like the opera comes to life. So, and I think it's also a possibility to think about what you have done over a long lifetime. So these big exhibitions are also a way to find new ideas or to compare certain decades and different kind of work.
Could you talk a little bit about that moment in the film where you discuss his family albums and the pictures that he's included over there? How did that scene come about?
Yeah, it was just by chance that I spoke to somebody, and he said, yes, right now he is working with these photos, and I just called him and asked whether we can drop by. And when he was watching at these photos, I was really that was, for me, it was quite emotional, because that was his past, and you have all these little past photos of him when he was 12 and then getting older, and you see in his face the young man is getting more self-consciousness. And yes, for me that was very important to have it in the film. And then of course I had in mind that yes, that he lost his family when he went to West Germany and never saw them again. And that's a typical European experience for people at that time. So,
and we've had these discussions about the hours of footage that you have, and you know, to kind of bring it down to just 90 minutes or so, what must have been a challenge. Was there something that you considered including that did not make it, and that you'd considered including for a while, but that did not eventually make it? And could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, obviously we started with 4 gray paintings, and they were on wood. And if we had stopped there, and if we had said, okay, we have enough, fine, that would have been really difficult for us, because these 4 paintings were destroyed, but not because of artistic reasons, but because the surface was moving. So he had to destroy these ones. And there are a variety of other very beautiful paintings, so very great, wonderful abstract paintings. But in the editing, we filmed 15 paintings, so I had really a great. It was hard to choose, but then we decided to choose these 2 yellow ones, because we started with the first stroke of paint on the canvas, and then you can compare how each one is developing. And I understood that it's not only a dialogue between Richter and the painting, but also among the paintings. So the paintings are influencing each other. So, and this is the moment the viewer, the viewer of the film, has this experience to look on the right side and on the left side and see what's going on, and maybe to make up his own mind. Because for me, for example, there were moments I thought, wow, that's it, and then in the next moment the painting was gone, because the squeegee goes over it and it was completely changed. So but maybe I tried with these 2 paintings to give the viewer the privilege to really make up his own mind, and to see the scene in his own way. So I think that was important. And for the other paintings, we have one from the beginning to the end, which is beautiful, but it's like a film is like a flat. I like to have it more empty and not too many stuff.
It's a really great film, and like you said, it helps one understand his working method in series across different canvases at one time as well, and to be able to understand them as a kind of a collective, even as they are in conversation with one another, is so important.
Very important aspect that the paintings are communicating, and he you know his studio, so he's every day he's crossing this big studio, and there is a lot of impact every day, so even if he isn't working, so that's has to do with the also with the architecture of the studio.
Well, thank you, Corinna. I wish we were doing this in person. And that was the original plan, and it would be so much more fun to kind of actually be in the space and have you see the exhibition, see where your film is situated, and then have a conversation about it. But I'm glad that we could do this in the interim.